What's going on, everyone? This is Brent from the Trading Fraternity, and I'm here today with a video about choosing timeframes for your chart. This was actually requested by someone that did see my ThinkOrSwim tutorial video for the basic setup, and they were wondering why I chose the timeframes that I had in my setup. So what I'm going to do today is just basically just walk you through my thought process of the timeframes. For those that haven't seen that video yet, go ahead and check that out in our tutorial section. It's the ThinkOrSwim basic setup video. And just to kind of get things started here, you can see I have the basic setup that is in that video, and I'm going to be running on a paper trading account today. So this is going to be catered to all the new guys, but this still applies to everyone that has a live account, so don't be worrying about that. But anyways, obviously you can see this is the flexible grid area of the setup, and you can see there is 3 different charts, and it has 3 different time frames, but it has, the same stock. Like I said in the setup video, this allows me to get an overall view of the stock that we were looking at. So the first chart, when I pull up an actual stock here, let me actually just pull up Apple for this instance. The first chart I like to look at is on the bottom right here, which is my bigger picture chart. As you can see, this is giving me a broad view of the stock here. For instance, this time frame on this chart is a daily 1-year chart. And for those that don't know, each candle represents the range of the stock that was trading within that time frame, and for this instance, this is a daily candle. So when it comes to time frame, when it comes to daily candles, I like to choose between 1 to 3 years. This is because I like to swing trade, and this allows me to get a history of the stock, of its, the price range and the volume here, so it helps me determine whether if I want to get in or out of a position. So since we are talking about bigger picture stocks, I actually have been using weekly charts lately, and I'll actually show you how to change your time frame on your platform. So you go to time frame here, go to customize list, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to add time frame. So for this time interval, I'm actually going to do a 3-year chart, but the aggregation period is going to be a weekly. So I'm going to add that, and you can see it's added at the bottom. I'm going to push apply, push OK, and I'm going to go time frame again and make this a 3-year weekly chart here. Now at the end of each week, I like to throw up this time frame because I like to see how the stock has performed for the week, and I like to compare it to the prior weeks just to see how it has performed in a bigger picture move. I actually don't really specifically don't use it on the actual stocks, like individual stocks. I like to use it on the indices and market sectors just to kind of give me an overall big picture of how everything is moving. But anyways, let me get back to the daily chart here. And after I look at the weekly chart, I always look at the daily charts just to kind of give me a little bit more color when it comes to seeing areas, you know what I mean? So I'm actually going to back out of the daily chart here. So the next chart I want to go over is the 10-day hourly chart. Let me zoom in on this. And again, these are hourly candles here. So, and like we explained in the daily chart, for each time frame of the candle, it is an hour. You see the range that has been traded on and the volume, of course, at the bottom. And as you can see, the most active for Apple was Wednesday and Thursday here when you look at the volume and the price range, because this had crazy volatility because of after the elections here. So everything in the market has been moving. Obviously on Friday here, it did settle at 108. And again, I like to use this chart here because it helps me determine price levels when it comes to entering and exiting a position, you know what I mean? So this basically is just more a focused version of the bigger picture chart that we saw at the bottom right. I like to actually compare the hourly chart, with the daily chart, so it kind of gives me a little bit more color. Like I said, I want to see areas that I can get in and out of a position, and if there's any kind of area that I should be more concerned about. So the last chart I want to go over is the top left here. Last but not least, it's going to be my intraday chart. Let me actually zoom in on this by double clicking. So for my intraday chart, I actually like to rock the 1-day 5-minute chart. Since this is the weekend, it's only showing 1 day's worth of action when really this setting actually shows 2 days worth of action. And I like to use 2 days worth of action because, actually let me pull up a different chart here. I'll pull up the SPY. When you look at this here, you look at the intraday move and you're like, why did the SPY, why is it dipping so hard right here? But when, for the sake of this, I'm going to look at the 5-day chart here and zoom in on the 2 days for the past 2 days. That little dip right there wasn't that dramatic, and you can see it didn't even take out yesterday's and the day before's lows right there. So obviously it's just pretty much range bound, so it's not that severe of a move, compared to if you were looking at a 1-day 5-minute. So since we are talking about perceived moves, I'm actually going to pull up the 1-minute chart here, and you can see why I don't like to use the 1-day 1-minute. And as you can see, it is a volatile mess, and that most people that that are watching this are going to end up with an ulcer at the end of the day, with anxiety and all that. And so obviously this is a little more chaotic compared to, you know, a 1-day 5-minute chart right here. This is a little bit more calm looking at. So this is pretty much it when it comes to my chart time frames. And like I said, when I pull up the stock, I actually go through every single time frame to help me determine my trade. And I always, of course, compare it with the SPY just to see if there's any correlation or any kind of divergence with it when it comes to the actual performance of the actual stock. You know, let me actually pull up Apple as an example. I have both SPY. So as you can see, Apple was, you know, outperformed the SPY that day. But like I said, this helps me out looking at a bigger picture move when it comes to these stocks, having every single time frame when it comes to bigger, mid kind of time frame into an intraday kind of time frame. So this pretty much wraps up the video here. So hopefully these time frames have helped you guys out. You know, I encourage you all to try different time frames outside of the ones that I have set for you guys, because, you know, like I said, what works for me might not work for you. I'm just showing you what works for me right now. Like I always end in every video, citizens keep hitting me in the chat room for more tutorial ideas, and everyone in YouTube, come and join our community. You know, that being said, you guys take care.